alaikum and welcome to the next episode of the show. And today we're going to be talking about the image of Muslim women in the media. And I think when I'm talking, I'm really talking about the media in Britain, but of course this would apply in other countries as well. And when we talk about media, we can talk about TV or newspapers or magazines. And I think we can say that a lot of the images and the stories that are out there about Muslims are very negative. And it is an issue for us here. And it has actually, I think, got worse. There is a feeling that many times newspapers can say something about Muslims, but maybe wouldn't say it about any other group of people. But I also always feel that there are positives that come out of negatives. And I think there's a lot of good that's happening as well. And I think as Muslims in Britain, if we can try and focus more on that, be realistic about what's happening, but focus on what we can do and how we can improve it, then I think that will be better for us. So I think if you analyse the both TV and newspapers, we have a spectrum of newspapers here, and it's generally a free press. So we have tabloids, which we call tabloids, which are the more kind of sensationalist papers, as well as some of the more serious. And within those, you get different types of stories, different kind of journalism, and I think it's also important for us to remember that most of the people in this country, obviously majority, aren't Muslim. If you were to ask them, or in surveys that we've done, you'll ask them where do they get their information about Islam and Muslims, they will say from the TV or newspapers. So that's why it's really important for us to recognise when there is a problem, see what we can do about it, highlight it to people, and also have other people speaking about it as well. So not just Muslims complaining about how Muslims are treated, but have other people with us, our allies and friends of different faiths and different backgrounds within the media itself as well, who recognise when there's prejudice or when things are not being done fairly, and to expose it and then to address it. I think the majority of, particularly for the image of Muslim women on TV and in newspapers, is very negative. So it's normally showing women who are oppressed or marginalised, not very happy, not living a very good life, and these are common images. There's also an obsession with dress, what Muslim women wear, what they don't wear. And actually that's not just amongst people who aren't Muslim, that's amongst Muslims as well. So I think that's an issue that we need to tackle, and I'll talk about that a bit later on. There's actually very few articles sometimes. If you look over a week, there'll normally be one or two articles or pieces on the news, and majority of those are actually negative. They rarely... but they sometimes, but rarely, feature positive, kind of professional women who are, feel comfortable with themselves, or who are showing an image that we feel would be more fair towards Islam and Muslims. And I think there's a number of reasons for some of this, and some of it obviously is historical as well. I think the relationship in Europe with religion has not always been positive, and religion has sometimes been sidelined for so-called modernisation. So for some people, historically and leading into now, it's actually difficult for them to relate to any sort of organised religion in a way that's positive. And obviously Islam and Muslims are part of that as well. And I think if you add to that the picture that people see from abroad, from other countries, from some of the Muslim countries where clearly women are being oppressed, or there's things that are happening that shouldn't really be happening, especially when it comes to relationship with women, then I think the collective image that is then given to people is very, very negative. And obviously we live in a Christian, majority Christian country, and in recent years there's been a lot of debate around religion and life, and how you can match up your kind of religion with your life and secular society, and how that fits, and rights and responsibilities of people. And I think Muslims have generally, for the last number of years, been at the heart of some of those discussions and debates, and I think that's a good thing. And I think we should also see that as a positive. Again, a sort of spotlight on Islam or religion in general, I think in the end will become positive for us. And I think most Muslims would say that as well, that the sort of conversations and discussions that are focused on religion are actually more positive than not. And some of the sort of more difficult issues that some religious people struggle to deal with we need to be having those discussions and debates as well. And how do we make sure that our faith is, fits, and how do we make sure that we can live alongside our neighbours of other faiths? So I think these kinds of conversations are happening more and more, and I think that's a good thing. And I think when it comes to people relating to Muslim women, there's somehow a feeling that it's not possible to be modern, to be in a sort of living in a country like this and be a practicing proud Muslim as well. And I think there's a general feeling that the two things, by many people, just feel that they just aren't compatible. And I think part of the message that Muslims in Britain need to get across to people is actually there's no clash. That actually it is doable. You can actually be a Muslim, practicing your faith, be proud of who you are, and be British at the same time. And of course, there's not only one way of, people feel that maybe there's only one way of being a Muslim and being a Muslim woman. And so again, they wouldn't necessarily see the diversity or the positives in diversity. And actually, a lot of Muslims also don't really recognise this enough as well. So I think one of the things that we need to be able to do is to show that there is diversity of thought, diversity of expression, and that we have a faith that has a framework and has laws and things in it that we need to abide by. But actually, at the same time, we can fit that into a comfortable, good life in Britain as well, where we're practicing our faith, having a relationship with Allah, following the teachings of the Prophet, peace be upon him, but still living a good life as a Muslim and a Muslim woman in Britain. And of course, we know that imagery is very, very powerful. And no doubt some of the images that come from, especially some of the Muslim countries, are very, very negative. And some of that will be exaggerated and some of it will be true. And I think we have to accept that. We have to recognise when that's happening and try and put ourselves in the shoes of others to make ourselves realise why they would see that as so negative or so oppressive, and why it's just not something they relate to. And obviously it doesn't mean that we have to appease and make people feel that they're right and we're wrong, of course not. And if we see oppression happening, or if we see other imagery coming from countries, we need to speak out about it as well when we know that it's wrong. I think for Muslim women in Britain especially, have been used by the far right. So far right groups in Britain, we don't have many, and thankfully they haven't entered mainstream politics in the way that they have in other countries in Europe at all. And that's because we've got a very good organisations and groups here that make sure that work is done to absolutely make sure that these people are not entering mainstream politics. Nevertheless, they are active in certain areas in the country. They do manipulate certain things, and they do pick on specifically Muslims and especially Muslim women. So the imagery that they see, they can then portray that in a way which says that, look, what, all Muslims are like this, all Muslim women are like that. And, it can actually be very, very negative. And, we all know how powerful images are. And especially now, as we move into an age where lots of things are online and it's very easily accessible and you can get information very quickly, imagery is even more important. And I think the image of the Muslim woman who's kind of foreign somehow and out of place here, doesn't fit in, is oppressed and sad and not living a very good life, actually is a very common image that people try and portray. And I think the veil or the scarf and even niqab as well is used as a sign of almost mystery, suppression, submission and oppression. So I think, again, these are images that have an historical kind of past. They're images that have been brought out from the past. But it's obviously a very simplistic narrative that is very easy to put across. And I think it's our job to make sure that we redress that and explain how things really are. And I think there's a general kind of simplistic way of looking at it, that if you're wearing a veil, you're oppressed, and if you don't, then you're free. And of course, it's not the case at all, but we need to be able to explain why that's not the case and actually show, I think, in other imagery and other positive images, why that's not the case. And it's a long-held view. Now with social media, 24/7 news, all sorts of TV channels projecting things from around the world, it's even easier for people to put negative images and stories out there. And we are, you know, we do have a job to do. We do have a big job to do. There are people who are spending their time, you know, all day and all night working on how to put across negative images and stories about Muslims, especially there's people in America. They have links to people here, and how can they work on making sure that Muslims are seen as negative, Muslim women are seen as oppressed, and that their life is, you know, not really worth living. So I think it's something that's historical as well, but that the social media and modern technologies are actually making it easier for people. We have to then take that challenge and say, okay, if they're using these new modern technology and media, then we also need to as well, in a positive way. I think it's hard for some people to understand why a woman would choose to wear a scarf or even to become Muslim. But I think it's really important for us to be able to portray why that is and how positive it is for us. I think it's very difficult for people when they only see one image of Islam and Muslims. They would ask somebody like me, why on earth would you become a Muslim? But I think I do still have hope. I think despite all of the sort of negative impressions and the images and the stories, and how there's really what we would call here an open season sometimes. Sometimes there's a story that will appear in a newspaper about Muslims that's actually completely made up and is proven later on to be totally fabricated. This has happened on a number of occasions, and obviously it's very, very sad when you find out that that's what's happening and that there are people actually doing that. But again, I think, you know, always looking at how we can turn a negative into a positive. And I also feel that, you know, people often ask me, do you think the headscarf, for example, would ever be banned in the UK? And my answer is always no, it won't. There's too much work that's being done, too many partnerships. It's been there's a lot of positive work that goes on across the communities. Muslims are, you know, absolutely part of every part of this country, in every profession, men and women. Too many links have been made. So when people ask me, would the headscarf, for example, ever be banned here, because it's seen as a symbol of oppression, I always say no. In the way that it has in France and in other places, I always say no, because I don't think it would. So I think our job as Muslims is to is to really, really tackle this issue, but in a way that's proactive and positive, and, you know, to really see what we can do about it. And after the break, I'll talk much more about what we can do, some of the things that are already happening as well by Muslims in Britain, to show that it's not all hopeless. So I'll see you after the break. Before the break, I was talking about the media, and especially Muslim women, and how they're portrayed in the media, certainly in Britain and in other places in Europe. And there's a lot of negative, and we've explained all of that. But I really want to also focus on some of the positives and things that are happening, and also think about things we can do. So anybody who's watching and feels that they want to try and do something about this, then I think that's something that we need to think about as well. There was an image recently online of a young Muslim woman in a headscarf. And written on the image, it said on there, "I'm too awesome to be oppressed." And it was a very powerful image. And nowadays, those kind of pictures and photographs travel all over the world. And you never know what will capture the imagination of people. And I really liked that image, because I thought it really says a lot about, with very few words, actually says a lot about the woman, the young woman in the picture. And I was sent it many, many times and online on many occasions. So I think these kinds of things are really good to try and redress some of the balance. Of course, the balance is difficult sometimes, but we have to still keep on trying. I think it's especially important for for women, you know, women to get involved in things. And we also need people actually in the media. So whether that be on mainstream TV, whether that be as journalists, writing, in newspapers, reporting, and also just coming on kind of regular chat shows and TV shows, not necessarily talking about issues that relate directly to Muslims, but just generally about issues in the country and for women and families, And I think the more we do that, the more the sort of impression or the image of Muslims becomes kind of normalised. And people start to realise, actually, these kind of stories and pictures that I've been fed over all of these years, where's it coming from? It's just nonsense, because Muslim women and men are just like us, you know, families and people who, you know, want to live a good life, work hard, you know, and just be a positive citizen of Britain. And we know in the Quran it always says after difficulty comes ease, and it's such an amazing, you know, thing for us to remember. And that kind of Quranic wisdom, I think we need to take with us wherever we go. And I always feel I'm an optimist, more positive than negative, or certainly try to be. And so I always try and look for what we can do, or what, you know, rather than focusing on the bad all the time, but actually look at what's good. And I think one of the positives that's definitely come out of things over the recent years has been an absolute interest in Muslims, especially women. On many occasions, people like myself, particularly people who've converted and others as well, and particularly women, are regularly interviewed for even for research, academic research, but also for TV and newspapers and women's magazines and mainstream, you know, media and press, about our stories or about why we became Muslim or what we think on certain issues. And actually sometimes it puts pressure on people like us to have to feel that we need to answer questions on behalf of the rest of the Muslims in this country, but also for the world as well. So I think it can be hard, but I think we have to just take it as part of our duty or responsibility to rebalance and to make sure that we represent the faith in the best way that we possibly can. And I think people, you know, sometimes feel puzzled, you know, why would somebody like me or others actually choose this faith when this faith is oppressive and negative and doesn't look favourably upon women? You know, why on earth would we choose it? So I think there's really a sort of a genuine interest that we haven't really seen the like of before. And I think that's a positive thing. I think it enables us to have discussion and dialogue. I think it helps for us to redress the balance, build bridges with other people, and really show that we are part of this country just like anybody else. We have our ups and downs, we have our difficult times within our families, we have problems with our children, our teenagers give us challenges, you know, husbands and wives sometimes have issues. I think once people realise that a lot of those things are absolutely common, it doesn't matter whether you're Muslim or not, I think that helps, and that this balance will start to be much more redressed. And obviously Muslim communities do have a role to play, and I think sometimes it's too easy for Muslims in this country to constantly blame what's happening and what images and pictures and stories are seen in the media as all the fault of others. And I think we also have a role to play. I think we do have issues. Muslim women's roles within their own community, within the Muslim community, are not always respected. The rights and responsibilities of Muslim women are not always understood by men and by women. And where we see a wrong within our own community, we should speak about it. I regularly speak about issues that I feel are keeping women back or going against actually part of our faith and its teachings when it comes to women. Certainly the understanding I have of gender relations and how women can be respected and should be, and how the Prophet was, peace be upon him. You know, sometimes I see the opposite of that in our own communities and on our own doorstep. And I think we need to be ready to speak about that when we can. I'm actually helping to organise an event next month, a high-profile kind of press event, about a topic that has become an issue for us as Muslims, or sort of the Pakistani mainly communities in the UK, and issues around child abuse. And there's been a few high-profile cases. And because they're high-profile cases, and because they make good or bad news stories, you know, the media have really focused on these particular incidents that have happened. Now, as Muslims, we can decide to say, look, it's not an Islamic issue, it's not a Muslim issue, and it's, you know, why should we speak about it? Or we can come forward and say, work with our partners and actually speak about these issues, and if there are wrongs going on in our community by men or women, then we need to speak about them. And when I mentioned it to in a meeting yesterday, that this was the event that we were doing, one of the Muslim women in the event said, will there be any women there? Because it's in a mosque, in a masjid. And I straight away said, of course there'll be women there, because I'll be there and I'll be speaking. But the fact that she even had to ask that question for me is very, very sad, but also very telling of where we're at in our own community sometimes. And she was saying it from experience of not being treated with respect and going to an event and not being allowed to attend or having to sit in a different room. And these kinds of issues between men and women and the way that women are treated are obviously very real. And for women like her, it has become a big problem. So when we do see wrong, we have to speak out, and if we don't speak out, others will tell the story for us, and that's what I think is not good for us. We need women to be involved. We need Muslim women to be at the forefront of many of our sort of initiatives and projects within our community. Why not? You know, women have a lot to offer, and if they're the best person for the job, then we need to put them forward. I think if we, just in sort of summary and thinking about some of the issues that I've touched upon, if we were to go onto Google now, and I do it regularly just to check, if you put in Muslim women into Google or any of the other internet search engines, the images that come back are very, very negative. And for me, it's very sad. They just don't portray the wonderful, amazing faith that I adopted 18 years ago. They just don't show what I know they could show. They don't show Muslim women in a positive way. Very rarely. They don't really show Muslim women engaging or doing any of the positive work that I know a lot of them do. We have Muslim women in this country who are there in every profession, at every kind of voluntary part of society, social action projects, doing good for others, feeding homeless, all sorts of work that Muslim women are doing. Very rarely gets portrayed, unfortunately, in the mainstream media, and I think we need to look at how we can rebalance that. So I think, just in summary, just to conclude really for this episode, and just to say that, look, it is negative. There are lots of things. We have to be aware of it. We can't be naive. We need to be thinking about what we're going to do to make a difference. I think we need to be working in the system. I think we need journalists and people within the media itself, not just Muslim focused media, but mainstream TV, newspapers, writers. You know, we have a lot of skills and people have a lot to offer, and I think we need to be able to show that. And through that, we will normalise. People will see Muslims as part of this country, which they are, proud to be British, but also very proud to be Muslim, able to deal with their faith on a daily basis without it having any compromise within a British society or within the laws here. You know, and to be a positive role model for others, whether they be Muslim or not. At the moment, people don't necessarily see Muslim women as role models, certainly within communities that aren't Muslim, and even within the Muslim communities themselves. So I think there's positives everywhere. And again, as always, I feel that Muslim women have a role to play alongside men, working with them. We need to be able to represent our faith, the teachings of the Prophet, peace be upon him, in a way that, sits with people comfortably, that redresses some of this, ugly balance that we've been seeing. I hope some of it's been interesting, and I will see you on the next episode. Assalamu alaikum.